and we are live. What is going on, my specialist? SPC here, and welcome back finally to the Midwest Cantina podcast. And what a way for us to come back, you guys, because today I have a very special guest. Today I have the motion capture and voice actor for the Duke from Resident Evil Village. Say hello to Aaron LaPlante. Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. Thanks a lot. This is great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've interviewed Nicole Tompkins. I had her on a couple years ago when she did Resident Evil 3. And I think it's been about 2 years now. I had Sarah from Resident Evil 7 on here, too.
Yes.
She's awesome. I love her.
Yeah, she is awesome. She's amazing. I don't know. She's one of my, Marguerite Baker is one of my favorite characters in the entire Resident Evil canon, I think.
She's easily the most terrifying and the most traumatizing.
Yeah, it's because I've played it a few times, but anytime like I'm looking at YouTube or looking at some kind of thing, and every time that one of those scenes of the sort of final boss fight with her flashes on the screen, it really like freaks me out even to this day.
Yeah, I played through the whole game the first time, but I played it now twice in VR, and that is a whole other experience.
I have a VR headset in the closet back here, and I actually set it up and was getting ready to play it, and I just went through the first part of the game. And I immediately took the headset off and took it all apart and put it in the closet. I actually haven't taken it out of the closet, to be honest with you. That scared the hell out of me, even from the. So you went through the whole game in VR, huh?
Yeah, that was
right.
That's the way to play that game, because it is.
Yeah. It's an amazing. It's an amazing experience, and even as cool as it is, I don't know, with technology the way that it is, I just sit there and think, what's it going to be like in like 10 years? Or you know what I mean? Or 5 years from now, like the kind of in-home experiences you'll be able to have with games.
Yeah, it's crazy how just far they've come from just playing Pong on your TV to like literally being inside of a video game yourself.
Yeah.
It's terrifying just to think of. So ironically enough, I told my wife that I had an interview with you, and she got so excited that she wrote all of my questions down for me.
Oh, all right, cool.
Cool. Yeah,
right.
So awesome. I'm gonna ask most of hers, but I'm also gonna throw in some Resident Evil stuff because obviously, of course, with you being the Duke, and we had a conversation before we started. So, first one I obviously want to ask, of course, what is the motion capture experience like? Is it kind of awkward? Is there a lot of stress behind it all?
Well, I guess I don't, for some actors there might not be. For me, there kind of was, just because it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. Because originally, for the most of the game, I didn't do any of the motion capture because the Duke doesn't really move around a lot. And even when I auditioned for it, they filmed me a lot, sort of moving around. And I guess you could sort of count that extended audition as my sort of mocap session, but it still wasn't mocap. So I had never done it, but I went back and did it for the DLC. And it was an amazing experience. And it was kind of, I don't know, it just kind of brought me back to being a kid. When I was a kid, I was really, really into, in addition to playing with action figures, or I wasn't really much of a sports kid, but I was one of those like, hey, let's play Army, or you know what I mean? Like those, the more imaginative games where we're all sort of playing characters. I was really, really into that. And the idea that you could just take an empty space and imagine it as a castle or whatever. And to be, at the time, I guess I was about 38 years old, to be 38 years old and getting to do that again. And also just kind of not wanting to bother anybody, but there's technology all around you. And I'm not one to speak on how they do it or how anything is accomplished, because I just have no idea. But, there's so much technology that people are really kind. So if I ask a question, they'll tell me. But generally speaking, you're just looking around and going like, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is incredible. And then you get to have that experience. And then you get to play the game. And most people just get to play the game. And so it's kind of neat. One of the greatest parts about working on any of these things is that you get a chance to have that extra memory of what it was like that day, where you're just kind of staring at numbers, and there's, you're wearing these suits and stuff, and you've got cameras on your heads, and there's different positions. I don't even know. I'm not qualified to really comment on the technical aspect of it, but it was an amazing experience, unique. And again, just like what we were talking about with VR, the whole time I was doing it, I was just thinking about, like, if this is how it is now, how is it going to be 5 years, 10 years? You know what I mean? I mean, it's already so amazing.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, like it's saying how far games have come just from like the early ages, especially even too. I mean, obviously, of course, Resident Evil obviously is a big one. How it's gone from going to that fixed camera angle where it looks like you're watching the game in a security camera to be first person, literally being in the game.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like it's, yeah. I can't believe how far technology has come. Even just me, I just turned 30 here a couple weeks ago, and it's just insane how. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
like, it's just insane.
40 a couple weeks ago.
Oh well, happy birthday to you as well.
What's your birthday? Wait a minute. When? Excuse us, everyone. When's your birthday?
St. Patrick's Day.
Oh man, mine's March 9th.
Oh, okay.
Happy birthday to us, Walter.
Yeah. Yes. So I guess in the voice acting range that you do, how do you come up with your voices for your characters?
I think that sometimes it depends on the kind of voice acting that I'm doing, because I think that it all starts with the audition, and it all really just kind of depends on the instructions that they give you, because every audition is different. And, some people say, oh, this kind of, video game auditions are like this, or, narration auditions are like this. But, to me, what I've noticed is it's been a real toss up. Sometimes they show you a picture of the character. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's in a script form. Sometimes it's just sentences. When I was doing the Duke, it's an Excel spreadsheet with sentences on it. And then they just give you context for what you're about to say. So it's a very in the moment process. Because also too, and I've said this before, what's so amazing, the evolution of the Duke's voice, when I first started, it was a really grovelly Eastern European accent. It sounded something like this. It was like, I've been waiting for you, Mr. Winters. And when I went in there, we just changed it around completely. They said, don't be as gravelly. It's not going to have an accent. Maybe just make it sort of lighter, make it a little mysterious. And so I started thinking about just kind of like different tones, modulating tones that are sort of up and down in odd places. I've been waiting for you, Mr. Winters. Anyone has heard of the likes of you. And the modulations and tones just kind of confusing. And the whole thing about the Duke is everybody loves him so much and he also is a sort of source of calm to after you experience really horrifically scary parts of the game. But then also he's scary in and of himself, that like you don't really know if you can trust him or not. And so, and again, in general, how I come up with voices is if they show you a picture of the character, a lot of times you can just look at the character's mouth, and whatever the character's mouth is doing can inform the voice. One time I had a picture of a character where they just so happened to draw the character like this, like with a mouth open like that. Mm-hmm. So I just started talking. I didn't want to close my mouth, and in not closing your mouth, suddenly there's a frantic energy there. You know what I mean? Like it just turns into a voice, or also too sometimes it's purely observational. If I always use the example, if somebody's standing at a bus stop, and they're just kind of like. I usually would assign them a tone of, so if you keep that tone, but then you just start talking, and then suddenly there's a cadence that happens, and that cadence can inform the character's intentions or maybe their level of intelligence. You know what I mean? Like, and then you can just bring it right back. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think that what I'm saying is, I think a lot of, I used to think it was really primitive, but I think it's just an instinctual thing, because when I was a little kid, I recently hooked up a VHS player in my office here, because I have all these old VHSs, and I found one that my uncle had taken from when I was about 5 years old. And he's going around the room and he's filming the family. And then he goes down to me, And I go, "Hi, my name's Aaron LaPlante." And right away it was like the camera's on you and you think to modulate your voice. So it's because every actor sort of leads with one thing or another. Some actors are very sort of, they use their hands a lot, or some actors really, it's all in their eyes. I think that I sort of just have always led with my voice. And so when I think of portraying a character, the first thing I always think of is what does their voice sound like? Even if it is a character that's like on camera, of which I don't do very much, but I still from here and there do it, or do something on stage. So yeah, I guess in a nutshell, hopefully that answers your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been curious, like with certain people, like how they do the voice, because for some people they just do their own natural voices. Because obviously, I'm sure I've looked at your history. Obviously, you've been in multiple different shows, so obviously you need to change your voice for each role that you
Yeah, well, the thing is, when I said that it depends on the work, it's also like an anime. The process of anime dubbing for me, or how it's always been for me, is I work with a particular studio. Sometimes I'll audition for the parts, so then I'll get a chance to make a choice, record it, send it over to them, and then if they decide they like it, then I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do for the voice before I go in there. But sometimes, again, like Resident Evil, it can completely change. A lot of times, though, sometimes there will be shows where I've worked with a studio enough that they know me. So maybe they have a few characters. Maybe it's like 4 or 5 different characters in one episode of a show coming up. And they need somebody to come in and just do all 4 of those characters. So then they say like, hey, Aaron, do you have time next week to do such and such show? And if I do, I say, yeah, and I'll go in there. And I don't know, they don't send me the script or anything. I don't know until I'm in there. And then usually if it's a engineer that I've worked with a lot, like my friend Ryan, he's an engineer and a director. We just kind of say, hey, how's it going? And have make small talk about our lives or whatever. And then and then a character comes up on the screen and I get a chance to see them. You get a chance to hear what the Japanese sounds like. And then you kind of just make a choice in the room. And sometimes you get it right away. And other times I'll do something. And then Ryan will say, that's a little bit too harsh. Maybe bring it down. And in the moment, we just make these choices. And in the moment, they seem kind of arbitrary. But after a while, an actor, really all they do is just commit to a choice that they make about a character and how the character is going to be when they're angry and sad and mysterious or whatever. But what's neat about that is that, so I'm sitting there with my friend Ryan and we're going back and forth here. And then I just go about my day. And then a while later, I'll be sitting around or whatever, and I'll be going through, Netflix or whatever else. And I'll see that and I'll get a chance to see it right there in the moment. And it's kind of an amazing experience. And so what I'm saying is sometimes you're just going there and doing your job. And other times you get to be sort of wildly creative. But I feel like voice actors, especially, you got to be sort of just creative on your feet. You're not wearing a costume. There's not another actor there. I mean, sometimes there is, but my career has been particularly solitary. More often than not, I'm by myself, which sometimes I prefer, but sometimes not. I mean, sometimes I would love to. One of the things that I don't have the benefit from is getting to learn from other voice actors. I just and to this, it's like what you were doing here, like reaching out to me and saying, hey, you want to talk? It's like I don't have a podcast, but I feel like I'll go out to lunch with different people that because I live here in Los Angeles and get a chance to just kind of get some mentoring from these people. Because I think that's also how you build up, is you just kind of commiserate with other voice actors, because all voice actors have their things. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be friends with one of the greatest voice actors in the world currently, and one of the greatest it's ever been, Eric Bauza. He's the voice of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and a million other things. We'll just be sitting there eating lunch or something, and he'll just kind of tell me some kind of silly idea that he had. Or like he said this before, so I don't feel like I'm speaking out of school, but he says that when he approached doing Daffy Duck's voice, he just thought of it as Richard Dreyfuss. He just thought of it as doing like Richard Dreyfuss with a lisp. And as funny as that sounds, that is how it is done. Hank Azaria, one of the greatest voice actors ever, and he said this before, that, a lot of his characters on The Simpsons are just bad impressions. That one of the cops that he does is just kind of like a bad Sylvester Stallone. And then Chief Wiggum's kind of like an Edward G. Robinson, sort of like a 30s gangster character. And you love to hear that kind of creativity. That is how it happens. Billy West is another one. I mean, just listen to any interview he's ever given about how he comes up with his characters. A lot of times they're these old vaudevillian comedians, and he just does their voices, but applies them to some like crazy character on Futurama. And then that character ends up being indelible. I mean, I'll tell you something here. This is getting really deep. I was telling you that I hooked up this VHS player over here. There's a video store. These video stores are starting to open up again because people are starting to collect VHS like they collect records. And so I've been going around and I found this. It's Oscar's Greatest Moments. It's this weird little documentary about the Academy Awards that I had on VHS when I was a kid, and I used to watch it over and over and over again. And I at the time, I was just kind of, I guess, obsessed with old Hollywood and stuff. But now what I realized was all the people on the screen, the different people in the segments, were all just some of the greatest actors that ever lived. Marlon Brando, Jack Lemmon, and all these. And there's one clip from a movie called Women in Love, and it stars this British actress named Glenda Jackson. And Glenda Jackson kind of talked like this. And in a way, that kind of like, wow, that sort of thing. I was watching it the other day and realized, not at the time, not when I was doing the voice, but I thought maybe that was an influence, some movie from the 70s, that suddenly the Duke sounds like Glenda Jackson from Women in Love. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing how, I mean, you could ask anybody that comes up with this stuff. I mean, it's just all of these influences packed into a choice. The artistic choice, and then what comes out winds up being something that people really, luckily, people really like.
It's kind of like a similar story like that Seth MacFarlane told, like how he got the voice of Quagmire. He used to listen to like these old records, and they used to have like people just selling stuff on there all the time. So that was how he got the voice for Quagmire. So I was like, oh,
yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's just they all sort of. I mean, you know, Fred Flintstone is like Jackie Gleason from The Honeymooners, and that's so obvious. But I mean, like, and maybe people listening to this or seeing this or whatever won't even know what The Honeymooners is. If you don't, watch The Honeymooners and watch The Flintstones and see the influence. I mean, it's really as much as a lot of these things could be considered just cartoons, video games. There's still just a lot of like amazing art influencing them and pushing the art forward. I mean, especially in games. And if you don't believe me, just go to any one of these conventions, because it's a lot of fun, if anything, just because it is like just a bomb of creativity. Everybody's dressing like these characters, you know what I mean? They're like making their own costumes, and I mean, it's just, or they're making stuff and then selling them at booths and stuff. It's the kind of economy that I want to be a part of. You know what I mean? Just like I would rather be like in an economy of creativity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can willingly say, like, I just love I don't know how you really want to call it. I just call it like the nerd community, just because how creative people are. They're not afraid to, express what they like me. Yeah. I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Obviously nowadays, Star Wars is a bit of a pushy subject for some people. So, it just depends on the people I'm talking to, but I'm not afraid to say I love Star Wars. I mean, hell, you just saw my room here a little while ago, and
it's important, and also too, it's like if you want to talk about like, and another thing is when you go to these conventions and you see people with their kids, and I mean that is like one of the greatest gifts anybody could ever give their kid would be just whatever it is, just really have enthusiasm about something. Not like they have to love Star Wars too, or that they have to, you know what I mean? But I mean, my folks, that's what they really instilled in us, is just like, whatever it is, just, have something you're into. Because there's a lot of people that just kind of go like, oh, I'm just going to go to work and then you watch TV and until I'm dead. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not much of a life. And that's why I like doing stuff like this, because like I just love just like with what we're doing now. I like talking to people about specific subjects. Like, again, I have a couple different podcasts. I have a horror podcast. This one I just kind of talk about whatever, movies or games, whatever I'm in the mood for. And I told you earlier, I've got a Star Wars podcast I do with a buddy of mine. We talk Mandalorian each and every single week. So I mean, This is
Well,
kind of
what's also cool, I have to say, is like every person that has a podcast, it is just an addition to your history in your life, all throughout your life. Like whatever you do in your life, wherever you go in your life, like whoever your descendants are or whatever, they'll be able to look back on this, see what you're like, what you think, what you love, what you're enthusiastic about. It's I mean, again, I was saying before, I don't really get a chance to be like mentored too much by these other voice actors because I don't get to work with them, but I do listen to podcasts a lot. And there's something about like discovering a pod. Where do you listen to podcasts? You listen to them in your bedroom, in your car, in your headphones, walking around in the sort of private moments. And after a while, especially if, I mean, there's been times in my life where I was particularly like lonely and didn't really, didn't have anybody to talk to, but I could listen to these people talk about movies and music. And a lot of times they were talking about stuff that I already knew about. But then also some of these podcasts become these like syllabuses of things to look out for. I listen to Dana Gould's a comedian that I really love, and he has a podcast called the Dana Gould Hour, and he's been doing it for years. I mean, but it's just every time I listen to it, I would get some new sort of movie to watch or book to read or something like that. And I don't know. I think that it's not only is it important to you, but it winds up being this record of just the conversations that you stimulate. I don't know. That's why when people ask me to do these, if they seem like just good-hearted people, I will always do it. You know what I mean? Just because for me, it's almost like a record. I don't know. Because now, like if anybody's ever curious about me or what I think or anything or how I am, they can just look this up on YouTube or something. You know what I mean? Like that's the craziest thing. I mean, at this point, because I've done enough of these things now, if I'm about to meet somebody or whatever, I've been meeting a lot of people where they'll tell me they'll already know something about me before I've met them. And that's an interesting thing because again, I was just driving around today. You know what I mean? Like I don't have a lot of money. You know what I mean? I make about as much as like a person that works at a bar or something, but I'm lucky enough to get to do all this amazing shit. You know what I mean? And these like cool games. And I mean, I couldn't be more grateful,
Yeah. I mean, obviously too, I mean, with how much people love the Duke, I mean, obviously you've made quite the impression on people and you've obviously, impacted a lot of people's lives because your version of basically the merchant from Resident Evil 4, obviously he's a very famous character. People love him. And it was a nice little addition to bring another type of merchant into the Resident Evil series. And yours is just so unique because it's like we kind of talked about earlier, like, can you trust this guy? Why is he helping you? What really is like his motives for helping Ethan throughout the course of the game?
Well, and it's interesting too, because it's like what I've also learned is that I can't really take too much ownership. I a little bit, because the voice is obviously important. And, motion capture is really important too. But in animation, I mean, specifically with with Primal, Gendy Tartakovsky is a genius. And he's just a genius artist and animator and legendary and always has been. And whatever he does is awesome. I mean, I'm biased, but still it's like, and so him and his team of animators, they create they create Spear, the caveman. And then I go into a booth and watch it on a monitor. I watch the clips on a monitor and then I match the intensity with my voice of what I see there. So the same kind of thing goes for the Duke. It's like, and I don't really know again, I'm not qualified to speak on their process, but there's like a whole entire army of people who are responsible for the way the Duke looks, his intentions, the writing, the lines, all that kind of stuff. And then I sort of add on that final thing. And what's interesting is there's a language barrier. So it's not, I mean, so it's like, I don't get a chance to really hear what they're saying. Like when I do a line, when I say a line, I can hear them all speaking to each other about it. And then there's, of course, a translator that says, okay, try it this way, try it that way. But it's just one of those things where it's almost like I'm trying to just be like a puppeteer. You know what I mean? Just like a avatar where you're just kind of like, I just zero in on like the voice. They're taking care of everything else, you know. But then when you add on the motion capture, which I hope I can do more of that. I mean, I'm not as like, because you look at like typical mocap actors, a lot of them are like really athletic and acrobatic and stuff, and I'm certainly not that, but very expressive like facially. So I don't know, who knows. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent there.
Oh, that's all good. Actually, we got a pretty good question here from May Ann. She's wondering, what is your favorite character to voice?
I mean, I really love the Duke. The Duke. I mean, I know that we've been talking about the Duke the whole time, so it seems like a boring answer, but it really is, because also too in the beginning, again, you know, we're trying to figure it out, but I think I've been doing it enough to where now I sort of really have a feel for the character. And in the DLC, I got to sort of take it to another level and be even more expressive and be kind of evil. And I don't know, I just kind of let it rip. And they obviously directed me, but it was so fun to just kind of explore that other side of the Duke. So I think, yeah, and also too, the Duke is a character that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with, because most of my characters are kind of one-off, especially in the anime world. I come in for like a few episodes or whatever and then leave. I mean, there's been a few that I have been like a main character on, but most of them I just, you know, come on for 1 or 2 or 3 episodes and then leave. So and I love, and then the other one is Spear, because he's well, I don't know, it's weird. I can't really pick a favorite between the two, because Spear is a whole nother thing. The experience of doing Spear has been like one of the great pleasures of my life, and I think also it might very well be my like contribution in the overall sense, you know what I mean? Like, because obviously I hope so much that I get to keep being an actor. I really hope I can, and I am. I mean, I am, but it's scary, man. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you know the next thing you're working on, sometimes you don't. I had a really amazing audition yesterday, but that doesn't mean anything. You know, you can be like, oh, well, you did a good job in your audition and be proud of yourself. But I don't, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. See, now I'm starting to go all over the map here. It's also too, to be honest with you, it's just weird to even though I've been talking about this stuff for a while, it still is kind of weird to be even talking about any of this stuff at all, because for the longest time I was just living here and doing stuff that nobody, you know, like that nobody would really see, or at least people would see and they would like it. We do stage shows and all this great stuff, but nobody ever like asks me how I do what I do, or what, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's an interesting thing. And I think in the past, when you got to the point in your career where people would be asking you how you do what you do, you'd be like on a show or something. They'd be like preparing you. But like, you know, I'm just in my room. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
in my room back here. And so it's kind of like I have been really concerned with wanting to like warmly and accurately describe the process, but not sound like an idiot or an asshole.
So I guess too, like, what made you actually want to do voice acting? Was it just, did you like watch maybe like a cartoon when you were younger, or you just like heard a specific voice and you're like, yeah, I can do that too?
I think so. I think it was that. I think it was, you know, because Pee Wee Herman was a really big influence on me as a kid, as it was a whole generation of people, and you could tell that. I mean, even though like Paul Rubens never really stepped out of character, I as a kid could tell that it was a guy doing a character and doing a voice. And then I think also too, it becomes like just. Again, every actor sort of has like stronger instincts in different areas. And I think my instinct of just like, not so much like doing impressions, even though that was a big thing when I was a kid, of like hearing a voice and then trying to sort of impersonate it, but also just really recognizing people that had different voices. My grandfather, for the most part, he had a voice that it sounded kind of weak. But when I would stay the night over there, in the morning, he'd get up and he'd sound like this. And for the first 2 hours of the day, he'd sound like this until his voice got hoarse. And by the end of the day, he sounded like this. And even though I knew he wasn't doing it on purpose, some of that stuff just kind of hits you. Whereas somebody else would look at that and just kind of go like, oh, whatever, it's a memory. And it doesn't really spur them on to do anything. But I don't know, when you're a kid, you're so observational. So as I got older, I had no idea how anyone would even hope to get into being a voice actor or anything. When I moved down here just because I am an actor, and also I love movies. And I'm from Seattle, which is not that far from here. So, and I had a friend that lived down here. So when I moved down here, it was just like, okay, what is available for me to do? And there's auditions, but auditions are just, in the beginning, you're just going in there and nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares. You're just paying your dues kind of. But I got a job as a tour guide at Warner Brothers Studios. And in the tour department, in the break room, there were all these crazy young people that were about my same age. And we'd all just be joking around and just being idiots. And there was one guy that said, hey, a group of my friends from college are starting a sketch comedy group. And I was like, I think I could do that. So I went to their meeting and we started a sketch group. And for like years, we had a show in Hollywood where we just wrote and performed sketches, like a Saturday Night Live kind of thing. Oh. And in a half-hour show, I would play probably like 5 different characters in different sketches. And, you can change your costume and everything. But one of the biggest ways to sort of differentiate between the characters, especially in real time in front of an audience, is to give them a distinct sounding voice. And hopefully the one voice would sound drastically different than the next. So I just kind of, I don't know, like, again, that's where I sort of learned to kind of lead with my voice in terms of like, how I'm going to be effective is making a choice about the voice. And then people seeing me, and a friend of mine knew this casting director and said, Aaron, it's not like he has any experience, but he can do different voices and he's a good actor. And so I had a meeting with her and she was very kind to me. We talked actually for a while, very similar to what we're doing now, just kind of having a conversation. And then she said, well, I don't have anything for you. She was the casting director at Sony Pictures Animation. So it was kind of this amazing chance to get a chance to meet her. But so I just tried to be as nice as I could because I didn't have any, I didn't have any like credits or anything. And I'm certainly not cool. So I was just like, just try to be nice. And so then about a month later, she said, Gendy Tartakovsky is doing a Popeye movie and he needs somebody to do the temporary voice of Bluto. And I'm not a famous person, so I wouldn't get a chance to actually be Bluto, but I could go in there and help out. So I recorded myself doing what I thought would be a Bluto voice and sent it in. And they said, yeah, he loves it. And so I met him and I knew his work, but I didn't really know him. And so I just went in there and I just kind of approached it like I said, okay, I'm playing Bluto in a sketch. What voice would I do? And read it like that, like it was like we were just reading a sketch with the same kind of intensity that one would have on stage. And Gendy really liked that, I think. Again, I can't speak for him, but I've been working with him ever since. He's the one that does Primal. So that's kind of how it all started for me. And even to this day, I pursue voice acting mostly. But, like on Saturday, I'm going to go shoot a thing with some people. I mean, just sometimes I'll do on camera stuff, but I think voice acting is where I belong because my instincts and my ability lend themselves well to voice acting, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, obviously, the different voices you've done just from us talking here this last 30 minutes. I mean, you obviously have a wide range of people you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm so sorry. Hopefully this isn't dead air, but can I refill my water?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, hold on 1 second.
Oh, you're good.
Like a little interlude or something.
Yeah, you're good. So I guess for you guys who are still watching, obviously, I hope you guys are enjoying it. Please make sure you guys are hitting that like button. And if you guys got some questions for Aaron, obviously, go ahead and throw out some more questions.
Okay, this is great. This is great podcasting. Sorry about that.
All good, man. It's all good.
Here we go.
So weirdly enough, you've actually already answered most of the questions that my wife had. So I guess now we'll kind of lean more into the Resident Evil side now of the podcast. So obviously we were talking, obviously, you have experience with Resident Evil. So what is kind of your history with it? Like, what's your favorite game, favorite character?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever, well, again, the first time I ever heard somebody say Resident Evil was my brother. My older brother is 3 years older than me. We shared a room most of growing up. And he just kind of was, I always say this, I'm really lucky to have had an older brother that was interested in interesting things. Like he just loved horror movies. He loved video games. And he was much more creative than I was and was much more well-read. And, a lot of times since he was older, he would be allowed to see a movie, but I wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. So there is a real tradition, and it still exists, I think, is like older siblings describing a movie to a younger sibling who hasn't seen it. And it's amazing to think of me laying in bed and my brother describing Terminator 2 to me before I'd even seen it. And just imagining wait a minute, there's a guy with liquid metal knives for hands and he runs really fast. You know what I mean? It's just kind of crazy. So I remember my brother talking about it. And then I had a friend in middle school named Matt who every time he'd have a birthday, we'd go over to his dad's place because they had this big TV and he would hook up the whatever game system and so we would play video games. And I remember we were over there and he put in Resident Evil. And it's we're at this slumber party and the game's actually really kind of scary. And I remember I wasn't really any good at games. I mean, I still am kind of not. So I would just kind of watch them play, but it was really scaring the crap out of me. And I was really embarrassed to sort of let everybody know how scared I was. So I really got the true experience. But again, all throughout growing up and even my early adulthood, I never could really afford game systems or what, you know what I mean? Especially in my early adult life in Seattle, I was more into movies and stuff. So I played the games when I was younger, but I didn't play any of the, I didn't play 3, 4, 5, 6, and none of them, and moved down here. And then I was working at a bar and these two guys came in and they were talking about Resident Evil 7. It had just come out. And they were talking about it, and it really, and since I'm a horror guy, I like horror as well. I was like, man, this is really cool. I got to check this out. And when I looked it up, I found out that Sarah Coates is Marguerite Baker, and I've known Sarah Coates since I was in high school. We had a French class together, and she's the reason I'm in the Resident Evil world. Because she's Marguerite Baker. And then after it was over, she was working with the production company. And they asked her if she knew anybody to bring in for auditions. And so she knew me and a few other people, and so brought us in. And that's how I even got the audition at all. So that's kind of, and so now of course I played Resident Evil 7. I've played Resident Evil Village. I've gone back and played the remake of 2. And I'm not I'm not a huge gamer, but I do have a system, and there have been times in my life where I've really been. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 was is huge. And Ben Davis, the guy that plays Dutch Vanderlyn, is a friend of mine. He's one of the first guys I met when I moved down to Los Angeles. So it was so again, it's this amazing thing to get a chance to play this game day in and day out, and then call him on the phone and just talk to him about it whenever I want, and hear that voice on the phone when you've been hearing it on the screen. It's kind of a cool experience.
Yeah, I actually, ironically enough, there he is, my buddy Matt. That is one of his favorite games. He is obsessed with it. So nice. I'm sure he probably really enjoyed hearing that. So I guess character-wise, then, who's your favorite character in Resident Evil?
Marguerite Baker. Marguerite Baker in Resident Evil 7, just because, it was just so scary, but also too, as much as in a video, well, you get the visual, she's terrifying, but Sarah's performance is, and not, everybody's performance in the game is amazing, but she just lets it rip. And specifically in the scenes where you're sort of hiding from her and you can just hear her kind of like angrily mumbling, and the character's back is turned, but you hear that voice, and it still just really freaks me out to this day. And Sarah's a dear friend of mine, and my gal and I were just over at their house for dinner a couple weeks ago, and she's the most amazing person ever. But it's funny to then go back and just hear that. But that's a testament to how great of an actor she is, because she just how she is in real life is not even recognizable. It's just something that she just channels up. And I hope I'm the same. I mean, you know what I mean? I hope that at least that's what I hope to achieve when I do a character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just talking with her when I did, I mean, she's so polar opposite of how she is in that game. It's insane.
Yeah. But I also think too, she's the kind of person I think that like we all have these wild emotions flowing through us, and it just depends on how you sort of get it out, and how you deal with it. I mean, just as human beings. And I think that like, I don't know what she's channeling, but she's just definitely got a fire, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, to be scary, but also just to be like, I don't know. She's, Marguerite Baker is not the last character she's going to play. I mean, that voice I'd follow that voice into battle.
Right. I guess then, out of the games, I guess you've played, I guess what would be your favorite game so far?
I think, boy, that's a good. Oh, you know what? Far Cry 5.
Okay.
I played Far Cry 5, and I think it's because I learned something about my taste for video games, or my taste for games is that I like variety. I like a lot of different kinds of weapons, a lot of different types of vehicles, a lot of different types of scenarios, a lot of different types of tasks. And Red Dead, of course, is cool, but you can't fly planes, and you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
So I think when I played that, there was something about, especially during the time period that I was playing it in, it was just, there was something about like, as much as I'm not like a cynic and I'm not obsessed with any sort of post-apocalyptic landscapes, but it was just kind of cool to know that like I could play the story of the game, but also I could just kind of explore, and it was a virtual world to explore in. And yeah, so I think, yeah, that's been my, and Red Dead's my second favorite though, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, mine is that Marvel Spider-Man that came out back in 2018.
Oh man, I mean, well, yeah, well, there you go. I mean, because that's like, people. I mean, you see Spider-Man in a certain light your whole life. You see him in comic books and on TV and in movies and in cartoons. But when you get to control it, you want to control it the way that you imagined it and felt it while you were sort of reading it or seeing it on a screen. They did that perfectly. I mean, I love that one too. But also too, that one was one almost in sort of like in like a, I know this is a strange comparison, but again, I'm not much of a gamer. I'm kind of a novice. But like, The Witcher is a really cool game, but it's confusing. Like all the potions and shit. Like it's hard for me to really navigate through all that stuff. And I feel like Spider-Man, I would get the hang of it, and I'd be like playing it, for a few weeks and having a good time. But I'd put it down for a week, and suddenly I forgot like the combinations and shit, or maybe I have a bad memory. So I put it down after a while, but I love that. I love that one.
Yeah, it's just story-wise, acting-wise, it's a beautiful game. I'm so excited for the new one coming out here in a couple months.
Oh yeah.
Especially I want to hear Tony Todd voice.
I want to hear Tony Todd do anything. I want to hear.
Yes.
I mean, shit. He is. I'd see. There's somebody that I would just love to. I don't know. I would just love to talk to him about his experience. I mean, he's done pod. I think he's done pod. I don't know. I'd love to just hear about like what he feels about acting. Because that's another thing. Especially when you're talking to an actor, every actor has a different way of doing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, any one of them that says like this is how you do it, I mean, that's bullshit. It's just every actor does it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how, like, especially like, you see, especially in that mocap room, you see all these actors all together, and they all have different processes, but they're all together doing the scene, and it all works. It's really cool. But yeah, I'd love to hear Tony Todd talk about his stuff.
I just want to hear the story of Candyman.
Yeah, yeah.
And we got another question here from Mayan. Since you're a horror guy, who's your favorite horror movie character?
My favorite horror movie character. Well, it goes back to the original. It goes back to the original Universal horror. It's the Invisible Man, and the reason why is because it's a voice acting performance. It's the whole movie. You don't really see him, but the whole even though you can see him with the bandages, the character is so dynamic, and it's just Claude Rains' voice. He's able to make that character notorious by how he sounds, even when you can't see him. But then, so that's kind of my favorite character. But then, like, my favorite monster, I go back to the original ones on up. So it's like, you say, like, well, what's your favorite Universal character? It would be the Invisible Man. What's your favorite Universal monster? It would be the Creature from the Black Lagoon. But then, who's your favorite slasher? I would say Michael Myers, just because I love that movie so much,
Yes.
And also too, because it's just again, it's the shape. You can sort of project onto it your own fears. And I also just love that movie, and I love John Carpenter, and I just love John Carpenter movies. So it's like, it's funny that's the thing, is that those questions are always so hard to answer, because I feel like I have a favorite. Well, any quote unquote nerd, it's like when you say favorite anything, it's your mind starts jumping off into a million different subgenres.
Yep.
So, but favorite character in a horror movie would be the Invisible Man to this day, because also too, the special effects are they're old, obviously, but they're just so clever and so real looking. They feel real. It's that old saying that's usually attributed to Roger Ebert, where he said, practical effects might look fake, but they feel real. And digital effects, they look real, but they just kind of feel fake. Even though I love some of the effect, I love it when they mix the two. I love it when you've got practical in the foreground and digital in the background, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Obviously, of course, the peak of practical effects, of course, is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, the Citizen Kane of practical. And it's funny about that too, is lately, like, just to go off, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, because we're talking about The Thing. I've been going through and watching these old videos and stuff, and starting to realize that all these movies I love, they are all attached to stories in my history. So The Thing, every time I think of The Thing, there's so many great memories of watching it with friends or whatever. But the original memory is, I used to just, like, maybe walk to the kitchen from my bedroom at night or something, and my dad would be watching a movie, and my dad was really fixated on what he was watching. So sometimes I would walk by to go to the kitchen, and I'd be really little, and I would just kind of stand there and watch what he was watching for a while before he would notice I was there. And I remember distinctly, like, getting up one night to go get, like, a glass of water or whatever, and walking in and standing there and watching the alien, come up out of the dog, that scene. And just, you're like watching that as a little kid, and it's as real as anything. It actually is there. Rob Bottin built it. And so you're just sitting there watching that, and then your dad goes, "Hey, get out of here." And you go, "Oh God." And you go back to your room, and then you have to get in bed. And, like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, and again, it's not, one would maybe say it was child abuse, but actually it ignited a fury in my mind about just, like, you're seeing that on, I don't know. And also being an imaginative kid, but being also a relatively intelligent, reasonable kid. I knew it wasn't real, but it looked so real. Your heart just has to start beating, even to this day. Because now I encourage anyone out there, if you want to have that same feeling again, go see these movies in a theater, because that's pretty common now. They're everywhere, not just in Los Angeles or New York or whatever. They're, like, everywhere, all major cities. They're doing these every city has some great theater that's playing these, go out and see these movies. Cause my fiance Tasha and I went with Sarah Coates and her husband, and a few months ago, maybe like a year ago, and the four of us went and saw The Thing at the Alamo Drafthouse, saw it in the theater. And again, the screen is bigger, but it's less about the screen and more about the fact that you are not in your home. You're not watching it on your laptop. You're not watching it even on your big screen TV, because it doesn't matter how big the screen is. You're still in your house. Mm-hmm. You have to get outside and actually be like engaged with the movie specifically. I'm very passionate about this subject, as you can tell.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I've become a very big horror fan over the years, and ironically enough, since you brought up the Universal monsters, I just started watching. I watched all of them finally, but I started them like 2 years ago, and
oh, nice.
And so far, I'd say my favorite monster it's a tie between the Wolfman or the Monster.
I mean, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I surround myself with the iconography of those movies, particularly the Wolfman, the Creature, the Invisible Man, and the Monster. I was never really much into the Mummy. I still am not, but yeah, during the pandemic, I got really into like painting models. And here, I'll show you one actually.
Oh.
I did these two. There's this great artist named Randy Lambert out of Oregon, and he does these like resin. They're not like bobbleheads, but they have big heads.
Oh.
But this is the Michael Landon "I Was a Teenage Werewolf" one that I did. Cool. It comes like this with this color, and then I painted it. And then this one is a really cool sculpt. This is.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Anyway, nerd alert.
Well, I definitely would agree, though. The Invisible Man is amazing. My friends, we watched it a couple weekends ago because they're kind of new to the Universal monsters, and that's the first one we watched. And the one big reason I love the Invisible Man is because that was the biggest inspiration for Mark Hamill to actually portray the Joker.
Oh, that's cool. You know what? Maybe I've heard that, but that's really cool. That's really cool. I love that. Yeah, because Claude Rains' voice. Yeah, that's really awesome. I love that. Well, and that was, and also too, I mean, growing up, like that was. Sorry, there's like a glare happening off my shirt. Excuse me.
No, you're good.
But my dad watched those movies incessantly when I was a kid, and I feel like again, it's like that influence that gets passed down through generations. Very just as similar as like if a dad was watching sport, watching some football team and was cheering, and you're a little kid and you see your dad cheering for that team, so then you go, oh, okay, well, I like that team too. I mean, it just gets passed down. And so my dad's sitting there and he seems to really be interested in old horror movies. My brother originally takes the mantle, and when I was a little kid, I was really into action movies, because when I was a kid, it was like the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, it was action movies were incredible. So I was more of like a Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme guy. But when I moved away, first when I moved to Seattle, I started to become more I started to kind of reach back to the horror stuff. And from then until now, I've just been like, I mean, everything I do, a lot of my friends, we go to Monster Palooza and stuff like that. I mean, we were all into it. We're all in. We love it.
So have you expanded watching like anything else in horror? Like, because lately for the last few years, I've really been into like big international horror movies. So like Korean and Japanese and stuff like that. Have you seen anything like that?
No, I mean, yes, some. I mean, yes, I guess. But it's funny. I lately have been really going back, watching a lot of older stuff. Okay. And newer stuff that comes out, because my fiance, she really has her eye on like what's coming up. My thing is more about stuff from the past. So I've just been watching and like rediscovering stuff. Like recently I rediscovered, which is an old Universal Monster classic, but it's not really like considered in the canon, but it's called The Old Dark House. And it was directed by James Whale, and it's Boris Karloff, but he plays like a big scary like butler guy. It's not like a real defined monster or anything, but it's a real classic like it's raining, the car is stuck in the mud, there's an old house, let's go. They go to the old house, a weird guy opens the door, that classic story. But it's also, in a way, it's like a weird, I'm going to make the comparison, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's a group of young people who get stuck or whatever, whatever. And then they go to this house and they meet this family, and the family is just crazy. Like there's the crazy person over here. Boris Karloff's character would be considered the Leatherface, like the big sort of lumbering, scary guy that's chasing everybody around. And so I don't know. I mean, that's something that I like to sort of rediscover old stuff. I think that's more my thing.
Oh, okay. That's one I've had on my watch list for quite a while. I wanted to see that because I think I watched a trailer for it, and I'm like, oh, that looks right up my alley.
Yeah, and I just don't think it wasn't really, I mean, also too, there's just now the access is just insane. And I feel like everybody just feels so overwhelmed with all the things that they want to watch. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to kind of keep track. That's another reason why I've been sort of just like watching analog stuff, or even just watching my DVDs as opposed to watching something streaming, because I want to just sort of like go about my night where it's like, I am making the decision to watch this versus like, hey, what's on? And then spending usually about 40 minutes just cycling through stuff before you actually pick anything,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's pretty much all the questions I had. We're almost getting here to the top of the hour, so I guess we do have one more small question here. Are you good at doing accents? And if you could, can you do a British character?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like it depends on the type of British character. Well, not depends. It just that, like in the show Primal, there's an episode halfway through the second season where it completely goes away from the story. It's not about Spear or Fang or any kind of primordial landscape. It's a bunch of British guys sitting around a fire talking about Cro-Magnon men and then a mental patient breaks in and there's this whole thing. And I play a constable that comes in, and you look at the character and he's got like he's a sort of and he says, "Excuse me, gentlemen, but I must warn you of something that happened down the road." So there's that British, but then there's also this British, and this British is a little more snotty, well, snooty, snotty and snooty, if you please. But then sometimes you could do a British accent. It's kind of like a Tom Hardy, you know what I mean? Sort of like a menacing British accent. So you don't want to run into on a dark alleyway, you know what I mean, mate? So yeah, I just kind of I guess so. But again, I don't really have accents that are like in my sort of it just I would again, it's like going into the studio and saying like, okay, this guy is like a Russian police officer. Do you think you can do that? And you just give it a shot. You know what I mean? But I don't know if I was to play, if they wanted me to play a character that was like on camera, I don't know if I'd be able to pull that off. But as a voice actor, I think I can. Again, there are some voice actors that are really methodic about it, and they'll actually like practice accents, so they have all the different accents. And I think that I just kind of take it as it comes. I think.
Okay. Well, all right. I think that is going to do it for the podcast. Again, Aaron, I want to thank you very much for coming on, and maybe hopefully we can have another conversation at some point talking about some horror movies.
Sounds good, man.
So let everybody know where they can find you, and obviously I'm sure certain things you can't really like talk about if you're doing things, but just let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I mean, my only social is Instagram. It's Dooder3, DOODER3, And I'm not really too active. I kind of every now and again I post funny little things, or if I'm in something, I'll post it. Generally speaking, not really that active. And Primal's on Adult Swim. You can find it on HBO Max through the Adult Swim hub, and it's a really amazing show. If you haven't seen it, we talked about Resident Evil, but yeah, those are, and just look me up on IMDb because that's another good resource of. I mean, it's always kind of fun to like find out that a person that you're like one that voiced one character also voiced this other character that you like, and so I always encourage people, if they're interested in me, to check out IMDb, because that's where you can find the work.
All right, sounds good. Well, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of the Midwest Cantina podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. So make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.